So now that we know about how species have evolved, we can take a look into the concept of macroevolution. We already analyzed and discussed, and now we know very well what microevolution refers to. And if you are not able to explain what microevolution stands for to a friend, could you please turn the video off and review microevolution with the microevolutionary forces and examples for these such microevolutionary forces that we discussed before. But now that you did that, welcome back, and let's talk a little bit about the idea of macroevolution, which refers, obviously, as the name says, a large-scale pattern of change, as changing not just from one species to another, but from one species to a diversity of species and major group of species. It also refers to major extinction events. Believe it or not, 99% of the species that existed on Earth are now extinct. And then other very good examples, or other examples of types of microevolution happening, refers to the arising or the formation or the evolution of flowering plants that we know are called angiosperms. That refers to the fact that they have a seed covered by a fruit. So angio refers to the covering, and sperm refers in Greek, in this case, to seed, which is a much more complex structure than sperm in English, which is a gamete. So a seed is actually an embryo protected by a nutritious tissue and then a seed coat. So flowering plants have not just seeds, but they also have fruits protecting them, and because of that, they're called angiosperms. And they have evolved today, probably 1 in 3 species or 1 in 4 species of plants are represented by flowering plants. So we live in the geological era, if you wish, of flowering plants. While dinosaurs have lived in a geological era of previous seed plants, such as gymnosperms, and maybe also an extinct group now called seed ferns. But let's analyze the word gymnosperms. Gymno refers to gymno or gym, in Greek meaning naked. So Greek or going naked in the gym, which is true. They were even going naked into the Olympics, which are only open to men. And was much freely to run and throw the javelin if you were not wrapped around in clunky wear. So the evolution of flowering plants from previous seed plants, such as gymnosperms, that include conifers like Christmas trees and fir, that could be fir or pine or spruce and so on, or red cedar and so on. Another good example of macroevolution, it's the evolution of tetrapods, or four-legged animals that include amphibians and birds and mammals, from fish that had no legs, or the evolution of birds from dinosaurs, and we'll come back to both of these in a moment. So patterns of macroevolution this time, so not examples, but patterns of macroevolution, could refer to stasis, in which a species is stuck in time. For whatever reason, it doesn't accumulate new mutations and new adaptations, and it doesn't evolve. So we can also call it a paleospecies if you wish, but we'll just stick with the word stasis. So one good example comes from fish. Actually, there are two such examples. Esox lucius, or Esox lucius, depending who you ask. It's pike. So it's a predatory fish that is found not only in North American lakes, but is also found in Ireland and Great Britain and all across Europe to the Danube Delta and probably farther east. And it is the same species, Esox lucius. Another good example also from fish that you read in your textbook refers to coelacanths. Coelacanths, which are ancient fish, more than 70 million years old, that we have known previously from fossils, like fossils found, for example, in Montana. These fish provide a very interesting and good link in between fish and four-legged animals such as tetrapods. But they were thought extinct till 1938, when a fisherman in South Africa has caught one of these coelacanths. And now we know that the species exists still, and since then they have been found all around the world in major oceans. Another example of a pattern of macroevolution, it's called exaptation, and refers to a particular structure that has evolved to do something and now has adapted to do something else. So there are several good examples of this, but probably one example would be, actually several examples, as I said. One example would be feathers in birds. So feathers in dinosaurs, we know now that some dinosaurs had feathers, and we definitely know that birds have evolved from dinosaurs. And you can look at turkey legs, and you probably know that you can produce watch belts from turkey legs, just similar that you would do from an alligator skin. So they have scales like a reptile. But going back to feathers in dinosaurs have evolved for thermal regulation, for heat regulation. But in birds, it took a total different direction, and it's adapted for flight. So it offers not just thermal regulation, but also lightness that a flying organism needs. Another good example, it's our own appendix. So we know it as being just a vestigial structure, a remnant from a previous group that probably had an important role, was probably much larger, and it had an important role, for example, in herbivores to store a larger amount of food. But to us, it could be a problem. So if seeds or anything else gets stuck in it, it can lead to infection and appendicitis, or worse, peritonitis and sepsis and death. So, but it turns out there are some studies that suggest that our own appendix, a vestigial structure, can take or is taking up new functions correlated to the immune system. And another really good example of exaptation, I believe, our own opposable thumb that has not evolved for texting. Sorry to disappoint you. It probably has evolved in primates from grabbing branches. Another type of pattern of macroevolution refers to mass extinctions, and as I mentioned before, from paleontological data, we know that there are several, up to 20 mass extinctions, and right now we're probably going through a mass extinction today, and even the time that this video took for you to listen, we might have lost species. I want you to refer to your textbook to read more about mass extinctions, and I want you to take the time to go back to the evolutionary timeline, lecture notes, and your textbook charts to find out where those major mass extinctions and what particular group of species were lost. When mass extinctions occur, so for example, about 65 million years ago, when we're pretty convinced that a large-sized meteor striking the earth, and it caused to block the sunlight, which it caused food availability, so plant sources so plants to disappear. And because of that, the food necessary for giant animals such as dinosaurs couldn't be sustained. So when a mass extinction has occurred, there is also a great opportunity for other species, in this case the mammals, which have evolved previously to this 65 million years ago. So they existed in small forms, such as mice size, or relatively small comparative to dinosaurs. So these mammals have had an opportunity. So in this case, the mammals had an opportunity to occupy the diverse empty niches that the dinosaurs left behind. And one interesting key innovation that mammals have, or the ancestor of mammals had, that led to this adaptive radiation, it's referring to the forelimbs of mammals. And you can see here this particular relatively simple structure of a reptile, so preceding mammals, has the complexity to allow for this adaptive radiation, to allow for a diverse type of locomotion, from flight in pterosaurs, which literally stand for winged lizard, or in bats, which are mammals, but they can fly, so they are more like a rodent. And they fly with this skin extension in between their pinky and their torso. So from this group of organisms, you get this key adaptation, this very versatile type of forelimb that allows for diverse locomotion through flight or walking in chickens. So they adapted from flying organisms, other birds, to be more walking. The same with the penguins. Porpoises are mammals that have adapted to swim. So they lost a lot of their ability to walk by returning back to water. Same with the whales we discussed earlier. And then we have here on the bottom the elephants, and of course all the other walking, four-legged walking mammals. So the elephant, as you can see, is walking on several fingers, but horses are running on just a fingernail. So not just a finger, but a fingernail. And then, of course, the forelimb of humans and other primates that has evolved for a diverse functionality of grabbing, and then for us it allowed us to develop tools and tool using. The last type of pattern of macroevolution that we want to discuss, it's referring to coevolution, that, as the word infers, the prefix co, in this time in Latin. So we learned about together in Greek, sim, S-Y-M or S-Y-N. Now we see that in Latin, the word co, like collaboration, and so on. It refers to two species that find a way to benefit. So it's a type of mutualism, right? So they find a way to benefit together, and they keep on adapting to each other's morphological and behavioral and ecological adaptations, to the point that in some scenarios the evolution is so specialized that if you lose one of the two partners of this coevolutionary adaptation, you could risk to lose both. So one example here in North America are the yucca plants, also called Spanish bayonets, which are several different species of, and they're planted around the world for their decorative large clusters of white flowers. But the yucca plants are adapted to be pollinated by specific types of moths. And even more so, the types of moth have, each species of yucca plant has adapted to have a particular species of moth that that pollinates it and then leads to fertilization. So that explains why yucca flowers are white, because they are visible to night flying pollinators such as moths. Please enjoy watching these videos, and please let me know if the links are not working anymore. But you will find some amazing examples from orchids in Europe that have adapted to mimic wasps or bees. So their flowers attract the males of those species to hopefully copulate with a female of that species, but it turns out that it's really just a flower. So it's called pollination by deception. So the orchid gets the benefit of the pollination, but unfortunately the male wasps don't get much, but maybe excitement. So please watch that video. Then you'll learn about ants, and this is just one example, ants and acacia. There are so many more examples of plants and ants that have co-evolved together to such extreme that the plant has adapted to develop mansions for these ants that live in the plant or next to the plant, but usually in the plant. And they get housing and food, and in return they protect the plant from other plants and even from insects that would love to take a bite of that plant, or even from elephants that would, again, would enjoy a meal from the plant. A very short clip of crocodiles enjoying having their own dental hygienists. So a species of birds has adapted to pick the remnant of meat pieces in a crocodile's mouths, and the crocodiles, which otherwise would love to eat anything that moves, including those birds, are just sitting put there, just enjoying this cleaning, just the same as you would do if you'd go to these aquariums where you can put your hands or your feet and you have these cute little fish that eat the dead epidermis. And then to wrap it up, several examples of coevolutionary adaptations in between anemones and fish and several other types of organisms in this Andaman Islands video next to the coast of, so belonging to India. Okay, I'll see you next time.